I listen to a ton of music with lyrics, but I never focus on the lyrics. I'm always like listening to the arrangement or the structure of the song, because that's the zone I work in, and I feel like it's that same idea with ambient music. Is I hear a lot of, I think people who don't spend a lot of time listening to this music often have a sort of negative reaction of like, well, it's not very interesting. And it's like, well, it's not interesting because you don't know what you're listening for, maybe, or you haven't given it the space or the time. Like it can totally be interesting, and you can listen to the same song 12 times and hear it differently every time. Yeah, especially if it's long, as ambient music tends to be. But I think that like you said, the space to kind of let it wash over you is really appealing in a world that moves so fast all the time.
Welcome to Ambient Discourses, conversations with musicians and composers who create musical experiences in sonic landscapes. My guest on the program is Ed Herbers, who is no stranger to the ambient and atmospheric genre. He has a number of releases to his name out at herbers.bandcamp.com. And I'm excited to have him here on the podcast to have a long-form conversation about all things music, the philosophy behind it, and whatever topics come up our way. So welcome, Ed, to the program. It's so great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Sincerely mean it. So let's get the pleasantries aside. Let's talk about how you got into music, what kind of the overview of your musical history is, and how you found yourself to where you are today.
Well, so it's funny, I was thinking about this kind of leading up to this conversation. I was like, I don't quite know how I found my way into the type of music that I write. I grew up in a house where my parents didn't play music. They listened to a lot of music, but it was mostly like, we'll listen to Billy Joel, we'll listen to the music we grew up with. And somehow I got myself really interested in just like exploring all music. I'm going to say it was largely in part due to a community volunteer radio station here in Cincinnati that, like, it's every 2 hours blocks there's a new host doing a completely different thing, and it would be like, we're listening to Greek rap music, and now we're listening to the Frank Zappa hour, and after that we're going to do a Mad Lib on the radio. And like that, listening to that, I was like in middle school listening to this radio station. And I think that kind of opened the door to me of like, wow, there's so much more to music. So I think that's really what, like, if I have to really pinpoint like a moment when I was like, I like music, it was this kind of exploring the possibility, the limitless possibilities, and this little tiny doorway in the radio station that kind of got me there. I also was really into the music of like the old computer games that I grew up with. It was like Myst came out in 1993, and that had like really atmospheric music. And I think there's something about that kind of got in the back of my brain. So between the like realization that there is so much music out there, and then also this like, oh, and there's music that makes you feel things or transports you somewhere, that those two kind of elements combined to bring me where I am.
And that Myst had a fantastic soundtrack. I loved that game. I don't know about you, but holy cow. And what a mind job, the red and the blue guy, like which book to press.
Yeah. Well, and the true answer, spoiler alert, is neither. They'll both betray you. But the world, I think the world building in that universe was really augmented by the fact that there was this music underscoring it that was ominous. It was minimal, but it always hit at the right time. It was like, oh, that music is telling me something is important here, and or it's really immersive. So I think I was really drawn to this idea of like, I could make music like that someday.
So when you first started out making music, I'm assuming it wasn't ambient. What did you get started out with?
Yeah. So this is the other kind of weird left turn. So what really started me wanting to create music was the whole genre of chiptune music, which is like people using Game Boy and Nintendo Entertainment System hardware, but they'd like hacked it to make music with it. So it was really simple waveforms, but very electronic and harsh in terms of like sonics. But I wanted to learn how that was done. And so and I was like 15 at the time. So I started down this path and the early internet of like, how do I do this? What tools do people use? Now it's like there's a million ways you can do it. But like when I was starting out, I couldn't quite figure out how that was done. And I was I discovered there's kind of a genre of a music software called a tracker. I don't know if you're familiar with this. There's a whole scene behind it, and it's how I still make music today. But trackers, instead of like your traditional audio program where you're kind of working with waveforms left to right, a tracker's like a player piano reel. It's like a grid, and you put notes on a grid and they scroll from the top down instead of left to right. So I'd have to show you some pictures or something so you could see what I mean.
That sounds like Fruity Loop. It sounds like Fruity Loops. Fruity Loops was similar, where you had at least the old version, the original version. I don't know what the new version's like now, but the original version had that where it was like, you know, you had these little boxes, or you could, you know, span the box. You know,
it's kind of
like your loops and stuff like that.
It was kind of like that, and the way that it worked, at least when I started using it, was you drew your own waveforms. So if you wanted something to sound like a snare, you had to like just draw a bunch of lines until it like crunched. Yeah. So everything was really basic, but it's not. From a purist perspective, it wasn't like pure chiptune, but it was lo-fi beepy music. And the first song I ever made was the theme to Mist, but in this like beepy, awful way. And I was like, okay, I can work with this. So for years, that was how I was working, making music. It was all very video gamey, electronic, chippy stuff. And at some point, I discovered like loop packs where you could download like a 8-bar drum beat and some weird atmospheric pad sounds that someone recorded. And when I discovered that, I was like, oh, there's different sounds, but they were compatible with that way of writing music. So I could like load them in and I could chop them up. And when I started doing that, then I realized, oh, there's atmospheric music can be made this way. And so, you know, it's like stepping stones. So, and then I use a much more sophisticated program now, called Renoise, but it's still a tracker at its core. It works a little more robustly than the old one that I started on, but, I still make the music that way. It's just it sounds different now. It sounds better.
Wow. That's really fascinating, because this just further underscores that, you know, to one of your statements earlier, that, you know, there's a million ways to do things now. I mean, and with so many of the musicians that I've spoken to, at least within the ambient genre, many of us have very vastly different approaches to how we go about making music.
And I was going to say, you have a very like physical setup, like working with hardware. And I am so used to this, like everything is a laptop. It's the only instrument I have is a laptop. But there are people who use guitar pedals and loopers, and like the whole Eurorack modular thing is fascinating to me, but I can't wrap my brain around it. Like, so I think that's what's really nice about ambient music is it's a very wide and flexible genre. I mean, it's an umbrella term, really. It's just like saying jazz. There's so many types of jazz. There's so many types of ambient music, and the approaches that people take are so varied. But everybody can create something that's beautiful, using their own unique set of tools.
And I love that there's really no hard, fast rules either in terms of what you can and cannot do. I mean, there's a few guidelines, you know, if we're talking like Pirates of the Caribbean here. These are more like guidelines, not rules, but like, you know, you're probably not going to have percussion or drums as a forefront element. it might be an accent at best. But that's, probably it. I mean, I mean, there are so many wide open rules. Like, there's one guy I saw on Instagram. He was making ambient music solely with Walkmans. He had
like tape loops.
He had like 8. Yeah, he had like 8. But he had like 8 Walkmans, and he was playing them like instruments. And so he would interject different loops at different times, and he'd play. It was like, okay, all right, Walkmans, great.
I think that it makes me feel not inferior, but I'm always amazed. Like, wow, the way that the amount of effort that goes into making music that way makes me feel like, oh, it's not as special when it's just a laptop. But it's to each their own, I suppose.
Well, don't. Well, 100%. Yeah. I mean, this is not something to even compare yourself against others, because that's. I mean, let's. We gotta nip that in the bud. The minute you start comparing yourself with other people.
But I think for me, what I look for when I listen to music now is like, I hear somebody make a sound some way, and I'm like, how do I do that with my setup? Like, I'm not cutting tape into pieces and making my own cassette loops, but the way they sound sometimes is amazing. So how could I do something like that electronically? I'm always looking for inspiration through the fact that I don't make music that way, but I feel like if they can make a sound using their method, whether that's the guitar and pedals or the modular system or whatever, or things like a wind chime put through a bunch of effects, like there's some really amazing things that people are doing. Yes. So I'm always looking to like grab an inspiration from, I heard something cool, and now that I know how it was done, I want to reverse engineer it in my own way and see if I can do it too, without all the equipment.
See, and that is beautiful. I mean, that is art right there. It's you have some sort of kernel of inspiration, whether it's something that someone else is doing, or you hear or see something going on in life, and you're like, I want to be able to create the essence of that. And then it's the creative problem solving of, all right, now what do I have available to me as tools? If we were to equate this into the painting world, you might use, all right, maybe no brushes are called for here. Maybe I need to rely on something else, like whipping a hula hoop that's been laced with paint at the canvas on the wall, or something abnormal like that.
Well, and I wouldn't say that I compare with envy either. Like, I hear some things that people make, and I'm simultaneously jealous but in awe. Like, I can't believe that came out of your mind. And how can I capture? It's like I want to capture your lightning in a bottle. Sometimes. Yeah. Well, I have mad respect for the tape loop crowd. Mm-hmm. Like, I sat down to try and make my own physical tape loop, and it did not go well. I mean, I was at it for 2 hours, sitting there meticulously, and I've already got the deck stacked against me because I have a tremor condition, so I can't. Oh yeah, it's really fine motion.
Yes, and it's very, very difficult. So it's like I'm doing all of the Zen breathing that I can muster up, just like, trying to do it careful, and I was like, I was so close to having it all done, and I was just starting to put the tape cover back on, and then something got bumped, and then the spool just went. I'm like,
it's over.
Nope.
It's over. Me. But you feel? Did you learn something from that?
I did, but following your lead here is I found another way to do it. So I'm like, well, why don't I just take a regular cassette and distress up the tape so it's all warbly and sounds terrible or good.
Yeah, depending on what you're going for.
Right. And then just record whatever I need onto the tape, and then I've got the audio distressed and warbled and all that, and then I find just a segment that I want to loop, and then that becomes either a preset in my 404 Mark II or whatever, or into the DAW,
Yeah. And like that's what I was saying earlier is like I'm amazed because you have this multifaceted hardware mixture and thinking about how you put all those pieces together. I hear people talk about gear acquisition syndrome, and I am grateful I don't have it. Because I feel like it's a slippery slope if you start to go down that path. But I feel like it also too can open all these doors to new sounds and inspirations, and not to say I feel limited in any way, because I don't. I enjoy the workflow I have, but I definitely sometimes feel like I'm missing out because I'm like, I want to fiddle with the knobs. Why does everybody else get to fiddle with the knobs?
The one thing that I will say though is and I need to save face here because I'm not entirely a gearhead. I actually started out primarily in the DAW. Logic is my tool set that I use, and there it's like I feel like a kid in an IKEA store. I have access to anything I want. I just have to put it together, and it might not work well, but I still have to put it together. But the challenge with gear is that it becomes another language, and you have to learn how to speak that language. Like my only real notable piece of like external gear that I use is the Roland 404, or no, excuse me, my Micro Freak. But the Micro Freak for no, it's Arturia.
Oh, Arturia, yeah.
So it's in fact I've got it right here. So it's just this really small device, and it has a envelope, cycling envelope, analog filter, some oscillators, but you have to figure that crap out, and it's not easy. And the one thing that I'll say about the Micro Freak is, as much as I enjoy it, and it's great for ambient music, especially if you pair it with some really nice effect pedals, the challenge with it is that there are no less than 3 or 4 different ways that what you do can vastly affect the volume output. So you're like constantly finger near the volume or the output, because like, is this choice that I'm about to make right now going to blow up the entire sound? And I've had that happen.
Does it have its own like bank of sound, or do you have to feed stuff into it and it's just like your controller for creation?
Both. So you start out with different waveform types. So like the standard like saw, square, all the different types of synthesis. So you can change the shape, and then you can change different values to kind of change how slowly it comes in or whatnot. So you do have to craft it, but they've introduced in the latest firmware the ability to bring in your own samples, which that was a game changer for me, because now now I can choose my favorite stuff from Logic, the things that I love all the time, every day of my life.
You can take your crumpled up tape recordings and feed them through it.
Yes. Yeah. If you can figure out how to play it as a loop, sure.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's lots of possibilities, but but like I said, it's a whole new language. It's like learning to just function in an entirely different way. It's not better or worse, it's just different. And for me personally, my own motivation for physical hardware is like, I want to be able to take a small mobile setup and just go get lost in the woods and just play by myself for 2 hours, and whatever comes out of it. That
is definitely the portability aspect of your music setup. Like, I hear a lot of people say they like the DAW-less music set, like studio, like having a good pedal set or a portable keyboard or some your rig that you can take somewhere. I hear a lot of people say, like, we all, generally speaking, spend a lot of time during our day looking at a computer screen, and then it's like, all right, now I have my free time. What am I going to do? I'm going to stare at my computer screen, and wanting to get away from that. Like, I want to be creative after work, but I don't want to look at the monitor again. So I take my rig out somewhere else, or have a rig that doesn't require you to look at a screen. Like, I think that's why a lot of people find those those setups appealing, is just it's not tied to a computer in a way. In some sense, yes, but the fact that you kind of have this unit that's all self-contained, and you can do what you want wherever you want with it. Go sit outside. I like the idea of that.
Yep. But of course, the trade-off, being in front of a DAW, you've got the world is at your fingertips in that case.
But limitations can be a great mode for creation, I think. I find that sometimes you have too many plugins available to you when you're working in the DAW, and you're like, gotta scale this back. Like, describing the way you described the way that Microfreak can build sounds, I have the Native Instruments Massive plugin, which I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Massive is very similar. It's like an entirely synthesized engine from the ground up, but there's like 7,000 different ways you can make sounds with it. And while it comes with presets that make it really easy to just like click around, if you really want to like dive in and build something, it's work, and it's not easy. And it's trying to figure out of those the presets, or even the, like, I don't know, what am I actually trying to achieve here? Do I want to create the sound and spend hours on it? Do I just want a preset and click around till I find something that makes my ears feel good? Like, I think that sometimes I spend more time looking for the sound than I do actually sitting and like making the music. So I can agree that the having too many choices can be a little paralyzing when it comes to this kind of thing.
Oh, 100%. And I'm a firm believer in your point that you made about, limitations being kind of an accelerant for creativity, because when you've got refined, really small amount of parameters, and like, all right, this is the instrument I've got. Now I've got to do something with it and just work with it. And I think it has a way of kind of accelerating, your ability to just get stuff on tape.
I was going to say, I don't want to jump too far. I was going to say, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but that was kind of one of the ways that this new album came together, was through working through a specific limitation or a specific mode. So,
there we go.
Segue.
100%. In fact, that's exactly where I was going to go. And I wanted to kind of start talking a little bit about your new album, Upper Atmosphere, by the way, which for the listener, that it comes out May 31st. Before you tell me about all of the amazing things that went into this album, I want to first tell you about my experience with this. So every album that I sit down and I'm like, okay, I'm going to intently listen to this, I give it my full and undivided attention. Usually it's out on a walk with the dog or just in the quiet of my space. And so I sat down and I'm like, all right, I'm going to listen very intently. I'm going to listen for all the little things, and I listen for the details. And I was probably into track 2 or track 3, and my mind just let go of my agenda of listening intently, and I was just lost in the ether of imagination, and was like, and then I realized probably around Points of Light or Stratosphere with track 7 or 8, like, oh wait, I was supposed to be listening intently.
Yeah, where'd the time go?
I guess we're going to have to do this again, but
hey, that's great.
This is what ambient music often does for me, though, is it gives the listener ample space to think, to imagine, to reflect. There's not a lot of intrusiveness, which there's something about it for me, and maybe it is for you too, and I'd be curious to hear your feelings about it. But ambient music feels like this much needed antidote to the noise of social media, the noise of being bombarded with infinite and literally infinite entertainment options, infinite options to distract us, but it's this spaciousness to just pause and reflect and to think and to ponder. And so I'm curious for you what the allure of ambient music is.
Yeah, I feel a lot of the same. It's kind of funny because as a musician in the 21st century who's, trying to do your own self-promo, I am generating more of that noise on social media, but it's like, listen to the ambient music, like disconnect. Like, how do you simultaneously use that to, bombard people with the Zen? But I do find that's what is appealing to me about this kind of music is it is simultaneously like you can zone out and stop hearing it even though it's there, or you can put all your attention into it and listen to it. And both experiences are perfectly valid. Like I listen to a ton of music with lyrics, but I never focus on the lyrics. I'm always like listening to the arrangement or the structure of the song. Yeah. Cause that's the zone I work in. And I feel like it's that same idea with ambient music is I hear a lot of, I think people who don't spend a lot of time listening to this music often have a sort of negative reaction of like, well, it's not very interesting. And it's like, well, it's not interesting because you don't know what you're listening for maybe, or you haven't given it the space or the time. Like, it can totally be interesting, and you can listen to the same song 12 times and hear it differently every time, especially if it's long, as ambient music tends to be. Yes. But I think that like you said, the space to kind of let it wash over you is really appealing in a world that moves so fast all the time.
Yeah. So upper atmosphere. So leading up to before you first sat down to start plotting away the music and your ideas and getting them out into digital form, what were some of the things that you were running through your mind, or some of the things that were inspiring you at the time?
Well, this album is a weird one in that regard because I usually start out with a very intentional like theme or something I'm pursuing. So like a couple of my recent albums, Migration, which came out in 2021. I like to take a lot of photos, like just amateur photography, but I'm always looking for like places and scenes that are striking. And so for that project, I was like, let's start with an image that I was looking through a bunch of pictures I took, and I was like, what if that image had a soundtrack? So that project was like that before anything was written, I already had like pictures that I was working from and saying like, what would the song be here? And then I have an album that's not, this is where I also play with ambient music, is ambient is a flexible genre. I have an album called Go Outside, which is it's much more acoustic focused music, but it's more like the old Windham Hill kind of like William Ackerman, George Winston stuff. But that album, my whole intent there was I want to write a soundtrack for outdoor activities, like music you'd listen to while you're on a hiking trail or while you're sitting by a campfire. And so they're very like scene based. So for this album, I didn't start that way. This album, the first song that I wrote was Cruising Altitude, which is the opener track. And I started that one last summer. And it was I'm between projects. I don't know what I want to work on. I don't do a lot of ambient music that's strictly like drone centered, like very slow evolving, not a lot of like clear melody. That's not usually the way I operate. So for this project, I was like, let me try it. How can I make it interesting without doing a lot? And so I had a pretty fun time making that, and I showed it to a few people and got some good reactions to it. And then I kind of set it aside and was like, I'll come back. That was like July or August of last year. And I didn't do anything else around this album, but I already had that name. Like I had the title of that song and the image of like, we're up in the air. So then we had the baby in October. So if anyone doesn't know this, our baby was born on Halloween, and he shook up everything, you know. So
Yes,
so nowadays our days were very full of logistics and trying to manage this like new house, new life, new routines or lack thereof. And for me, writing music has always been like the creative venting exercise. Like, I'm stressed, I should go write some music. So talk about stress, but also talk about limited time. So I was in a position where I was like, I need to make something, but I don't have the resources to like invest hours into it. So this project then, almost every song started as, let me take a stem from a previous work, some other song that I've already released. Let me just take a piece of it, like a guitar part or a synth pad or something, and just work with that. So all of these songs started as just, and most of them are, it's like the core sample pitched down an octave, pitched up an octave, and like playing at the regular octave, and then with a bunch of effects applied, which transforms them into something new. And this approach was, right. So this approach made it so that I could sit down for 15 minutes and actually come away with something. I was like, I feel good about this. This is nice. And it was a lot less of like, it was more like, let's just see where things go, instead of let me figure out the chord structure and the melody I want to write and the instrument, like talking about the paralysis of choice of all your sounds. Like I wasn't doing that here. Most of these songs are like one piece with some effects and stuff driving the sound and the way it sounds. But for that then, so then I was writing these songs in the like little bits and pieces of time that I had while we're trying to navigate our new life. And I was also playing them out loud while we're trying to help him sleep, because early on he did not like to sleep, and our evenings, my evenings were like spent pacing a figure eight upstairs, like, please just close your eyes. And while I was doing that, I was like, let me play this music. Maybe the music will calm him down. We'll subliminally get into his head and teach him that, you know, there is a space where you can space out. So as I started to put this music together and I had all these things, I was like, how do these fit together? Because I'm really liking them. And then I thought, well, I have that other piece, Cruising Altitude, sitting in a folder somewhere. Let's see how they all fit together. So I started doing some tracking, and none of these had names at the time. It was like work in progress 1, work in progress 2, and just like playing them ad nauseum for a baby who's not listening to them, but I am. So over all that kind of replay and rework, all of a sudden I was like, they have a very spacey sound. And that first song is about being up in the air, and Cruising Altitude is starting to get into the upper atmosphere. I was like, what can we do with that? So then the name Upper Atmosphere really was there. It was either Edge of Space or Upper Atmosphere. That was really the two titles I was working with from the start. And I was... so then I had the kind of the struggle of like, what do you name all these songs? And I chuckle because I recently listened to your album Atmos, which is the same idea. I was like, oh, more Exos, or less Stratosphere. So I had Stratosphere. I have Exos, which was derived from Exosphere. And then I was like, oh, these song names are familiar. And I almost did that, where all the song titles were just going to be layers of the atmosphere. I actually almost did it. So you and I were operating like this album was finished in like December. I don't know when you were working on yours, but we might have had, you know, great minds thinking alike across the ether here.
Yeah, probably. Let's check out one of the tracks from Ed Herber's brand new album, Upper Atmosphere. This is Stratosphere here on Ambient Discourses.
So
actually, if I may on that, so the Rick Rubin made a comment in his book. In fact, I've got it right here. I had it right here. Where did it go? He has a book on his only book on creativity, but he has a point that he firmly believes in, that every song, every album, every concept has a time and a place that it wants to just be. And when you have those, in fact, I've had moments like that where I have these ideas for songs or albums or whatever, and I will hear it somewhere else, like new. that very week, month, whatever, where there's just this thing that just needs to be birthed into the universe. So, maybe to that point, you and I were reading the tea leaves on the same frequency.
Yeah. Oh, and
there we go.
I think we were both kind of operating in similar sonic spaces too. Like this. So for me, this was working. Like I said, that first song being very intentionally written as like original material, where all these other ones were more experiments in reuse. They still all fill a very minimal space sound wise, which felt very alien to me. And so thinking about all of these kind of themes kind of playing off each other, it was like space to breathe, the concept of like working out of your comfort zone, the all of that kind of fed into this theme of the atmosphere and space that we live in. I was kind of thinking like micro and macro, like I'm sitting here in my home and I'm part of planet Earth and we're this little blip in space. How can I capture that? If I were to take all these songs and put them together, they're really all part of this bigger, like, I don't know, the human experience. Yeah. Maybe I'm over expostulating about this album, but I feel like what ultimately came out of it, based on what you were just saying about the songs wanted to be, it's kind of how I feel.
I wouldn't downplay, its role or its ability. Of course we can't control how other people are going to respond to it, but there's something about, I think part of it comes to the allure of the idea of absolute freedom from the noise, from all the chaos, because there's, I would give so much, right, just to be able to go up to the space station and to be able to float weightless for a whole day.
Yeah.
And in the peace and quiet, and then to have the moment to be able to look out the observatory window and see the Earth in all its beauty with my own eyes. And astronauts have described that moment for them as transcendent, where it's you start to experience so many things all at the same time. The idea of I'm so small and the Earth is so big, but even the Earth itself is so small in the grand scheme of everything, that now, because the Earth is small and it's fragile and finite, and makes me even smaller, small speck in the story of it all.
And for me, it was like I was I'm holding a new life in my hands, and I'm like, oh, you're so small, and this world that you're in, this universe you're in, is enormous. And like, I think trying to pull that together, because that's really what birthed these songs. I was trying to kind of connect that theme of our little place on Earth and our little place in this big universe, how they make us feel, like what you were just describing, that that feeling of looking down on Earth, and how like people don't know how to describe it. I think they refer to it as the overview effect, like looking at the overview of Earth. And it's the song title I used for the very last track on the album, because I was kind of thinking, if our beginning is we're up in the atmosphere, cruising altitude, kind of headed out, And then the end is like, we're coming back, and how have we changed? It's kind of trying to tie the thread between all these pieces of music to really tell a story without saying anything. So it's I'm really excited about this, how this turned out, just because it was not intentional, but it worked so well. Like everything, the pieces fell together in a way that felt right, and like you were describing, in the moment, it's just where they needed to be. So I'm glad it worked.
It's the magic of music composition when you're just dialed in and really connected and paying attention to your life, the world around you, the things you observe and hear. And
do you ever have that feeling? Oh, sorry. Do you ever have that feeling when you're listening to your own music, thinking like, I made this? Like sometimes I'm in disbelief. Like, I can't believe that like this didn't exist before, and now it does, and it came out of me. And kind of like a self, not to like, I don't know. I don't want to be like pompous about my own music, but just that idea of like, I can't believe that I am capable of creating. It feels amazing sometimes.
That's quite honestly, that's the feeling I had with when I finished Atmos. So Atmos was a weird experiment, kind of, not unlike the experiment that you were going through. You were trying to piece together these different things that you've used in the past and repurpose them. My experiment was like, all right, I want to create, and I don't remember how long I timed them. It was like around roughly, I don't know, 7 to 10 minutes each piece. But I was like, my goal is I want to have 9 or 10 distinctly different voices from the DAW. And so I used a DAW. I didn't use any physical hardware except a MIDI controller. I just have to make that confession there.
It's okay. It sounds good.
But then what my goal was then I want all of these songs to have I think it was a 60-second period of time that they overlap, so that you have this slow, seamless transition from one into another. And I still listen back and it feels foreign to me. Like, how did I make this? Because it feels otherworldly to me when I go back and listen. And I really selfishly enjoy listening to that album, which, a sidebar on that, if as an artist, if you are not enjoying listening to your own music, that's the first thing you need to change. You need to change that, not for the sake of, becoming more wildly successful, but the purpose of being an artist, or the whole purpose of having music or being able to create art, is for you to be able to process life and to express yourself in a way that helps you keep moving forward and keep growing and keep evolving, and to be able to work through the harder things or the wonderful things in life and to process all that. And so you should be listening to your own music and enjoying it, enjoying the process, enjoying the listening. And some people don't. Some people are very uncomfortable with that idea, but it's kind of a healthy self-love, I would put it as. But
I agree. I listen to my own music far too often. It's like sometimes I feel like it's the only thing I'm listening to. But I definitely think there is a piece of, or I understand where people are coming from when they say they don't like to listen to what they've created. And I think it's because you kind of listen to it with the critic ear more than anyone else. Yes. So you're like, oh, I would have changed that, or that note was bad and it's in the final recording and I missed it. Like, I have those moments, but I leave that music out in the world because it's part of the journey. Like, there are songs that I've written on older releases that I listen to now and I'm like, oh, this doesn't sound great, but it is what it is, and it's where I was at that time. And I'm not going to try and hide it or wash it away or take it down just because I don't like it, because it doesn't mean that someone else will hear those things and think the same thing. And I think that there is, and I'm sure you have felt experiences too. There is a simultaneous excitement and fear that comes with sharing your music with other people, because I listen to these things over and over and over again to the point where I stop hearing them as something new. I'm like, oh, this is just how it is. This is it. And then you show it to someone else, and there's that moment when you kind of take a step back and you're like, wait a minute, what if they don't like it? What if I'm wrong? and kind of bracing yourself for that. And then it's really validating when someone hears that music you've created and they connect with it too. I find because I don't write music with lyrics, people tend to connect to lyrics because lyrics tell a story or can describe how you're feeling in explicit terms. But I like this kind of music, this instrumental music that also conveys feelings, and you can connect with it based on the way the music, like where the music takes you. And sometimes I think there's a vulnerability there, just like there is in writing lyrics. That I wrote a song to be, it's very like, it's morose, or I wrote this song to express feelings that I had at the time I was creating it. And while people don't know exactly where those are coming from, they may be able to sense it or pick it up. And that sometimes, I don't know, when it comes through, when it comes through in the music, it can, that's that moment of, do I really want people to listen to this?
Well, but that's the risk. That's the journey.
Yeah.
The interesting thing that I've kind of settled on over the years, and I've been at this forever. I've been making music for over 30 years. I'm old. And have been listening to music for nearly 50 years old. But there is, like you said, there is the option or the ability to have your own, as a listener, a moment of vulnerability with the music, and to let it become a part of your, I hate to use this because it sounds a little cheesy, but to let it become the soundtrack for your moment or your life. Like one album that comes to mind, little shout out to Alan Constantine, who's an amazing cinematic ambient neoclassical artist. We play him on the program, but his recent album, when I had is Opus 85, and I took it with me on a walk to go listen, and had this experience where I was kind of already processing through some things that I was going through at the time, and the music fell right into all of those feelings, all of the thoughts that I've been having, all of the things that I've been working through. And I'm 2-3 songs into the album, and I'm weeping over things that I'm experiencing, not just musically, but also in my life. And the two become merged, and you're like, oh, this is a little uncomfortable. But through it all, to the very end of the album, there's this feeling of like you're letting go of all of this tension, all of these things, these feelings, and it all in the course of experiencing an album. And that's the vulnerability that a listener can have with our music.
Well, and I think that's that's what I find so amazing too, is it speaks really highly of what Alan Constantine put together, because there's likely an emotion behind that song that was channeled into it, and now you've connected that with that somehow. And I think the emotion, the way we process music, and the fact that we find it so emotional is a fascinating piece of human psychology, because art in general, we're all like driving to create things, but why? And I hear a chord change, and for some reason that swell made me want to cry, and I don't know why. Like, we can't explain it, but we all feel it. And I think that I definitely channel the introspective side of writing music, just almost everything means something to me, whether I am consciously bringing an emotion to the surface or more just trying to evoke a mood that feels right for the place I was when I was writing it. But I find it incredible that other people can listen to that later and have a similar reaction or a completely different one. But as long as someone's hearing it and it means something to them, it's really a remarkable and hard to describe experience as a musician to someone who is not. Like, what motivates me to write music? I can't really explain it. I'm chasing something, some emotional output, but I can't quite put my finger on it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm really fascinated about this concept of how music moves us, but we can't put our finger on it. Like, I don't know. What do you like? I have my own thoughts that maybe there is something about like frequency resonance and how the body physically responds to it, or maybe it's the natural tension and release that's often found in music. Or what for you are some of the elements that you're able to kind of maybe point a finger to that maybe and help influence why music is so emotionally connectable with you?
It's a big question. I think about, for me, and maybe this is a me only thing, I find piano in accents in music really compelling. Like when it's not piano oriented music, like I enjoy solo piano music, but when it's like suddenly there is a piano and something in a piece that was otherwise not there, that often hits me in a way that I find very emotional. And I think it traces for me back to like some of my early experiences with being drawn to this kind of music were like George Winston, the old pianist from the Windham Hill days. I mentioned that earlier. His album December is one that we used to listen to when I was a kid around the holidays. And for some reason now that, like, I don't know, I have an emotional connection to that album in general, but something about a melody, a piano melody showing up in some other context. I think there's a part of it that's connected back to that. Like, oh, I have this strong emotional connection to this specific piano music. Now I'm hearing something else that evokes a piece of that and it brings me there. I think that's for me what makes some music feel emotional, in that I'm like maybe feeling it in my subconscious of like, sonically, this sounds like this other thing that really I feel strongly about. And now it's pulling a thread of that out and I'm feeling it again. That I think is one area where I definitely notice it when it happens in music. And almost always I'm like, I'm feeling something right now. Like the goosebumps reaction. Like, I think there's a piece of that. All of those things are related. What about you? Because it's different for everyone, I think.
It is. I think something you said struck a chord with me about the connection to an artist or an album that you listened to when you were much more younger in more formative years. Like, I think about, I'm a sucker for really good harmonies and music that moves to some sort of resolution, where it's either a happy resolve or it's a minor resolution type of thing. And as you were mentioning about George Winston and having flashbacks, I had flashbacks in my mind, because my mind's out of control, to when I was somewhere around 3 or 4 years old, and my parents had put a radio in my room, and being the curious little toddler, turn on the radio and listen to the radio. My first memory of music, of like deeply listening to music, was Elton John's Yellow Brick Road. When I heard that song, and when it got to the chorus and la, like, I cried my eyes out. I'm this 3 or 4 year old, however old I was, really young, and that just blew me out. Like, part of it is that the melody resembles kind of crying, wailing out of emotion, and it was that sort of metaphorical connection that somehow it's a part of a facet about what I like about music, but I think that changes and evolves as for me at least, it's like the more things I get exposed to, the more things that start to really trip my trigger. Like there are some classical pieces that will always be fundamentally like 5-star songs, and I will get goosebumps from them every time. Like one of the most anti-ambient music pieces on planet Earth, the 1812 Overture. Every time, like I had an experience when I was in high school. Our band instructor had us go out and said, I want you to go find a copy of 1812 Overture at the library, because we're going to learn the piece. And she says, I want you to take it into your bedroom and I want you to listen. And I did. I found a tape, slapped in my Walkman, cranked it up, listened on my bed, and I'm just laying there, and when the bells and the cannons kicked in, it was just, I was head to toe goosebumps, because it was this amalgamation of just celebratory noise, and that was music. And so it's all these little things, these little moments that have kind of influenced what really makes music connectable and relatable for me is when you find a way to convey human emotion in a way that's musical, and it can be done in any mediums. Like there are paintings that move me to tears, or sculptures or whatever, but I think it has a lot to do with the sensitivity of the artist and how much of their own emotion they're putting into the piece. Because that I can pick up on pretty quickly. If there's something that has an emotional depth to the notation, to the arrangement, that's what really gets me, I think. So.
Well, and I think that I find it interesting because we are talking primarily about music that is atmospheric and has no words, and kind of designed for this meditative space, which I think naturally brings people to be reflective and think about their emotions. I think there's this genre of music naturally brings people into that space, but I am always amazed that there's really like heavy metal music and very intense music that is also that artist's expression of their emotions. And yes. sometimes I read lyrics to things and I'm like, wow, this is so incredibly deep. And then you listen to it and you're like, what? Like there's like this huge vulnerability in the lyrics, and then it's like super intense music, and they feel like they don't fit together. But I think that it's great that these things exist for the people who connect with that, and that just because it's like not necessarily my cup of tea doesn't mean that it's not going to be what someone else is like. This is the thing that's going to bring me to tears, isn't it?
It's amazing the vastly different things that will connect with us. I mean, you're right. I mean, I forget who I was talking to. They were basically, saying that for for them, in addition to ambient music, death metal was also a very great source of meditative release for them, and is this experience where they can let go of everything that they're holding on to, and they just feel the visceral emotion and drive of, you know, screaming guitars and wailing drums and
I think that like guttural scream, the guttural scream is like our primal instinct. Like, I got to get it out. And that I can understand where that would be freeing in a way. Yeah. I am acquainted with several other musicians in the ambient space who write noise ambient, which is not a style I've ever tried, but at face value, it's like listening to radio static sometimes, or listening to that wall of noise. And there's a part of me that's, you know, you bristle at first and you're like, why would I listen to this? But if you really immerse yourself in it, it's just as amazingly like freeing space of, it's almost like the white noise of the noise cancels out the white noise in your head that's clearing, and it clears your mind, and then you can focus, you can think. And I think all of this, we're saying the same thing so many different ways, but like, music is a great form of expression. And I find it incredible, as someone who writes music and consumes music, that there are a million different ways to make it, and that, you know, there's only like so many notes and chords, but we've all managed to take them and retwist them in so many different ways that the same song has never been written twice. Close, maybe, but not... But every time something is different, and it's different for each of us.
Are you familiar with? I don't remember the original composer's name and who performed it originally, but there is. It started out in I believe in the classical realm, the composition in C, and then all it is the note C, but literally what it's all about then is all of the extremely minute variances in pitch, in resonance, and exploring that. Like, in fact, there was one album recently that came my way from one of the promoters, that there's a violinist along with I think it was was it a percussionist? I don't. But she came out with her own album in the key of C, and it was C, you know, the whole. But I mean, it was really interesting though. The ideas of really exploring, listening to music. Taylor Dupree just is. Coming out with a new album. It's a reissue of his original album, Still. It's a minimalist ambient piece released in 2002. And, like, there's next to no change. Like, the changes within the compositions are very hard to discern. And so it becomes this listening exercise of really working on your listening ability to listen for the variances. And well, he reissued that. He's coming out with this reissue, but he took that album and he meticulously recomposed it for chamber music. So now you've got clarinet, violin, cello, whatever, playing the exact same notation, trying to maintain the same level of resonance and repetition. And it's just, to the average listener, you're like, they're playing the same damn thing.
Yeah, it just goes on. No, that's really cool.
What's the...
I am not familiar with that, but I'll have to check that out.
I highly recommend it, if anything, to really stretch your listening capacity and to challenge yourself. Going back to your earlier introduction to like the noise music, genre. One of the interesting things that, as I've been in this position of trying to meet all these different artists and being exposed to so many different types of music, noise is right along in that category. I get a lot of noise music, and it requires something that we don't typically do as listeners, and that's suspending judgment, like withholding your opinion, withholding your judgment until you've reached the very end. Then it's like, all right, then you go ahead, make your own observations. But I find when you come to and it's very difficult to do, but when you come to a composition or an album, and you do your best to just say, all right, I'm not going to judge this. I'm just going to let it be exactly what it is and just sit with it and be okay with it, which is, by the way, is that really has its roots in Buddhist meditation traditions, is the idea of being able to sit and observe your own feelings, your own sensations going on in your body, all the sensations going on around you, and being okay with every bit of it. So, like, if you're sitting in meditation and a back pain creeps up, or your leg starts itching, or your face is like, learning to sit, to observe, and to be okay with that, and to be, it's the term equanimity, the idea of being completely peaceful and at ease regardless of whatever it is that has arisen. Because the Buddhists teach whatever has the nature to arise must also pass. So that feeling or sensation that you have, good or bad, it's going to pass. It will. And if it doesn't, well, it'll go on until you die, and then
then it will pass. But it's good advice.
But the same thing musically is this idea of trying to stretch our limitations and our own boundaries that we place on our own ability to listen to music, and trying to suspend the judgment and just listen and accept it as it is, and roll with it and see what happens.
I think that as a musician, I feel like that gives us a higher maybe appreciation for music, even if it's something you wouldn't want to listen to again. And I think for me too, that, like I described when we first started talking, I very early on was listening to this very avant-garde radio station that I never knew what I was going to hear. And I think for me, that was the joy of music, really, the excitement around what did someone else come up with, and whether it's noise music or death metal or an ambient drone piece that never changes. I think that I come at it with this definitely an appreciation for it, but an excitement around, I just want to experience this because this person cared enough to bring this to the world. They worked really hard on it, whether me, the listener, thinks it sounds like they did. I have seen posters for bands on like telephone poles that are like, scan the QR code to listen to our mixtape. And I'm like, sometimes they're really awful. And I love it because I'm like, they're passionate about this. They're more passionate than me. I've never made a sticker and put it on a telephone pole to tell someone to listen to my music. So they went the extra mile. They really care, and I followed through. So it worked. I think that that's definitely an attribute that I wish more people took the time for, was, like you said, withhold your judgment until it's over and experience it for what it is. And maybe reflect on why you feel the way you do. Because I think that's, let's talk about social media again. We're very reactionary. Everything is, what am I seeing? How do I respond? And there's no time for reflection. So giving yourself the opportunity and grace to think about why you are reacting the way you are, whether that's listening to music or anything you're experiencing in life. I think that for me, music is a very important part of creating that space. So
let's check out one more track from Ed Herber's brand new album, Upper Atmosphere. This is entitled The Overview Effect, here on Ambient Discourses. That's a really skillful thing, that the idea that you brought up, the asking yourself questions like, why do I feel this way? Why is my response this way to this music? Why am I so adverse to it? Or why do I really like this? Or why is this connecting with me? Like being more inquisitive about your relationship to the music. And I think that can really bring about some interesting insights to your own self and to your tastes, and maybe even how you came to like the things that you like or dislike the things that you dislike. And that's I don't know, I think that's a very skillful observation on your part.
Thanks.
So kudos to you.
Yeah, appreciate it. I don't know that it's an entirely original thought, but I do think that I do think that our relationship to music, especially as writers of music, is something that you don't always necessarily take that time for. I think that a big part of, like we were describing earlier, is that listening to something, when you listen to something and you feel inspired by it or envious of it, maybe in a way, those are moments where you definitely are like, yes, I am thinking about why I like that sound, or I like that tone or whatever. But I'm connecting to something in the music. But often you have those reactions that are, particularly when you're like, I don't like this. I don't care to explain why. I don't like it. I think that those are the moments where we have a little more opportunity, maybe as a culture, to maybe be more open to discourse or reflection around, you know, what makes you think that this is good or bad, or why do you feel the way you do? But
right. So on that note about discourse and sharing and having our ideas and opinions about music, let's slightly shift gears to social media. We talked, it's come up a few times now. I have my very specific feeling about the function and role of social media. I'm curious to get yours in terms of how you feel about it. Is it useful for you, or give me the lowdown for you about social media?
This is it's a loaded question, because my first public music release was in 2011. So 13 years ago now. And I didn't do any kind of self-promotion to try and make people know that I was writing music, listen to music, until last year. So 12 years after. So I was just like creating art in the void, basically, because I wasn't on social media. I was on Facebook for like a long time, but only among like personal acquaintances. I wasn't really in that space of like, oh, I could make things, I could tell the world about this. So I think last year, sorry, getting ahead of myself. So last year I made it my goal to say, like, I want people to start listening to this. Like, how do I do that? Where do I need to start? And all of the arrows are pointing to, you got to promote it through social media, because that's where people are. So I will say it's been highly rewarding in that regard. I started putting things out there. I started an Instagram account, which was my first kind of foray into modern social media. Having to think about, like, how do you get people's attention in the world where everything is trying to get their attention? I find that when people have connected with it, and the fact that we're talking now is a result of me having gotten myself out into this world of promoting in social media. So I think there are benefits. At a macro level, though, I hate it. I don't think that I think that social media tends to oversimplify what it means to connect with people. I think that it makes it too easy sometimes to be like, oh, I'm connected to the world. When at its core, like, we're all kind of being manipulated by algorithms that we don't understand. And do I actually like this thing, or does it think I like this thing? Do I like, we're being sold a product, or we are the product. So I have very strong mixed feelings about it, in that I definitely appreciate that it exists because it has helped me personally. But on the other hand, I understand why people hire a PR person or marketing person to do this for them.
Yes, right. The people that actually have the stomach for doing this very thing and being on that platform.
Yeah. How about you?
So, well, let's see. How much time do we have? I'll try and make it succinct. Because I tend to be pretty verbose. It's both a skill and a fault.
It's context dependent.
Yes, it is very. For me, on the consumption side, social media is a problem. Very much so. It's when I've had the apps on my phone, despite all my best intentions, I violate all of my best intentions. Like I'll use the iOS screen time limitation and put a 30-minute time limit on Instagram. Do I obey that 30-minute limitation? No. I'm like, snooze. Give me another 15 minutes.
Stop telling me. You're not my mom.
Stop telling me what to do.
Yeah.
But so removing the apps altogether from my phone has been entirely liberating, because now I notice with much more crystal clarity the impulse to, I'm bored. What do I got? I got to do something. I'm bored. I'm bored. I'm bored. I'm bored. So I've started carrying a sketch pad around with me with paper, or with pens, ink and pencils and all that, and just draw instead.
Yeah.
So, if I got to feed the boredom, I feed it something else now. But now, from the music standpoint of sight, this is where it gets a little bit more complicated and nuanced for me. It's black and white issue for me consuming. Like, no. Like, if I want... In fact, one of my guests, one of my more recent guests, Chris Thompson, he's a composer out of New York City, and he had made this observation and comment that with social media, we are simultaneously buying the cure from the one who sold us the disease.
It's true.
So when you're scrolling, you're looking for... Maybe you're looking for something to affirm who you are or the choices you've made. You're looking for the people who think the same way, or believe the same things that you believe, or have the same observations about things. This is why people tend to come together in groups because of, like, I don't want to call anyone out, but I'm just going to use this is purely an example. It's not, I'm not calling anyone out, okay?
Yeah, we're talking about, we talked about reserving your judgment, remember?
So, like for example, I see this often where people tend to decide what their problem is, what their issue is, and then they go hang out and commiserate with all the other people that have that same condition. Oh, I'm this, I'm ADHD, or I'm this, or I'm that. And they reinforce that idea by the community that they exist in, but they're not actually doing anything to solve the problem, or whatever the thing is. So for me, for example, it might be I'm looking for something to help give me direction in the ideas that I think, or the philosophies that... But the way it's all set up is you never find the answer. You get little glimpses of it and a little dopamine hit, and you're like, oh, that was really good. That was really insightful. I'm going to have to remember that for next time. Scroll.
And it's gone.
Yeah. And I might even save it for later, but I don't ever go back.
Oh, no. I don't even know how to get to them. I save stuff all the time. Like, I'll look at that again.
They bury it. I mean, you have to, like in Instagram, you have to go into your profile, and then down somewhere, it's like buried, all your saved links. And then to get to that, it's like, no. And you're just scrolling, and you keep looking for that little thing that makes you feel that little bit better about your existence. And it's terrible. People will be like, "Oh, it's fine. I'm a normal human being." Well, yeah, okay, but it's such a that is for me so black and white. But from the side of music and being able to promote yourself, this for me is a really gray area, and I think comes down to a matter of how skillfully you can use the platform without being taken over by the platform. And of course, we all have different levels of capacity of being able to stomach being on Facebook, being on Instagram, whatever our threshold is. But
yeah,
but I've started changing my tune on social media, in that I don't think I need it at all. When I think back to the 90s, when I was actively making music in my heyday, back in the day, when you had a show coming up, you posted flyers and you talked to all your friends, and you got all your friends to come out to the show. And because they were your friends, they were going to support you. Or, you know, some of your friends might even buy that demo tape that sounds like crap, but they still bought it. They paid their $7, and you know, they're showing support for you. You know, and if you wanted to get to the big stardom, you had all the things that you had to do. You had to put together a good demo tape. You had to shop the demo, and then you maybe find a recording studio that was affordable enough, and then you eventually got a much better product, and then you start shopping with labels. You're doing concerts and all the things. But by and large, you did not have the hope of becoming a world-renowned star. You had to really work at it to get to that point.
And it was definitely more. It was more community focused. Like, I think we look at social media. We look at social media as a way of connecting with communities of people, and there are real examples where it is successful. But the actual, like, boots on the ground, like, I'm in my neighborhood at this venue every week at open mic night, and people know who I am. Like, that's a very different and probably more definitely more authentic and probably more effective form of connection than posting 1,000 times online every week just to catch the algorithm's attention so that more people see your stuff. Yeah.
And back in the day, you really didn't have a whole lot that was teasing you into the possibility of more. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you had the examples of all your favorite artists that you bought on vinyl or cassette or CD or whatever, and then you have the unspoken allure of, ooh, maybe someday I'll get signed, and you know, all the whatever. But nowadays, you have not just the social media, the social networks with their algorithms that are actively working against you unless you're willing to pay. Yeah. Which that's the game. That's the game. Is you want to be seen, you have to pay. And even that's not a guarantee. Like, I have run so many Facebook ad campaigns, and the majority of the active engagements are not even real accounts. Yeah. You know,
like, I haven't gone down that path. I'm afraid to, because of these types of stories. Yeah.
No, do not bother because no, don't save your money, because like one time I ran a very specific campaign, and I was like, I'm literally targeting my home city. It's very specific, you know, and all of the engagements were not even like, Facebook didn't even follow their own limitations. They were still soliciting all of these other things. And so I'm getting likes and hits from Bangladesh and, you know, or Vietnam or wherever. And it's like, no, I targeted this specific city. And so they're fruitless. I mean, you can occasionally catch a few people along the way. But the big thing the revelation that I had about all of this is that back then you really only had a finite amount of things selling you the dream. But now it's all the channels. You have, you know, the streaming platforms. You have the social media. You have all of the different promoters out there online making a name for themselves. You have all the distribution centers. You have all the software vendors. Everyone is selling the dream online, and we're all buying into it from a capitalist standpoint. So this is this is where the rubber hits the road for me, is that in the end, it's all about capitalism, and now you're treating music like a commodity. And while it is for many people a commodity, at its purest state, it's just art, and it's the ability of self-expression based on an observation. And we've made, I mean, career musicians aren't going to like what I have to say about this, but we've made it into a commodity, something that really belongs in the sacred space of community. To your point about, we played in community. We had all our friends come out, or family, or neighbors, or what have you. You know, all the same people are there at open mic night every Wednesday, and I'm there, and they're there, and we're all having a good time, and we're all singing our favorite songs, or whatever. And, you know, even looking to some of the ancient cultures that have been around for thousands of years, music for them is not solely about entertainment. It's about communication. It's about ritual. It's about celebrating together as a community, and not how many streams you're getting on Spotify, or not who's busting out on the charts or whatever. We've made it something it's not supposed to be, is what I feel. So
I think that, and this is where I it's like the blessing and the curse too, is today now, like, tools to create are so accessible that anyone can do it and put their stuff out there. Like, I wouldn't be where I am if that system didn't exist, because I'm not in I'm not equipped to put this music out on a big label. But the idea that, like, if you know where to look, we're all competing to be heard in this ecosystem now of everyone can be an artist. But on the other hand, I think that there's a beauty in that. And one of the advantages of social media is, when it works, you do find the right people. I think that things like the Bandcamp listening party, I have a few online communities that are not necessarily like open social media, but, you know, groups of people who I would not have met without the internet, who are very excited about those types of events, because they kind of bring us back to that community. Like, it's my community, but they're all we're geographically dispersed. There's people all over the world, but we're here to listen to. And same with the relay station. When you do the program on Sundays, I like the idea that we're all kind of tuning in for this, what is essentially a community event now, but we're doing it from our own homes. That, like, there's a beauty in the fact that could not have happened in the world that you started creating music in. And that there is some resemblance to that now through these channels. But I agree with the bigger picture of the internet and the algorithms and the social media networks have made it really poisonous and sell a dream that anyone can be that. And that, I think it really ultimately comes down to, even in this big open internet, that the key is really finding the small one-on-one connections with people. Like, oh, you like this music? Me too. Hey, we should chat. And here we are.
100%. 100%. And this is why I'm actually considering dropping social media altogether for promoting, because it's these one-on-one connections. Yeah, and actually, maybe let me amend that statement a little bit. That maybe the purpose of social media is no longer to promote myself, and definitely not consumption, because that's a waste of my time. You know, as a parent of teens who need me to drive them everywhere, I don't have that kind of time anymore. You know, but using it as a tool to initiate a connection that I did not have before is huge. And having these one-on-one exchanges like this are way more valuable than any amount of money that I could put into an ad campaign. Yeah. Because it's in this one-on-one connection that I have that's like, listen, you know what? And all my guests that I've ever had on this podcast, every single one of them, I have taken at least one of their albums with me on a long walk, and they get my undivided attention. And then I get the honor and the privilege to tell them about that experience and to tell them how much I love their music. And that exchange is worth more than gold. It's worth more than anything that you could get from the social networks, because now you have a face and a name and an actual person on the other end who's like, yeah, this was great, I really enjoyed it too. And or being able to, and it opens up other doors to collaboration opportunities, or to just making a friend, like you know.
Well, sorry,
no,
don't want to step on you. So no. There, I don't know where this fits in the ecosystem. Like, is it social media? Kind of. Discord, the application Discord, is where I have made the most connections to artists and musicians, and just like in recent memory, it is through music focused communities there that I have really made, and it's been more impactful than any social media campaign has ever been, because in those cases, it is this type of environment. It's, hey, I'm going to share this thing. You share your music. I'll listen to it. I'll come back and tell you about it. And now someone else is doing the same. And suddenly over time, it's like, oh, I've made some friends, and it's a community. And not just I'm shouting into the void and hopefully someone will press the heart button on me or something like that. It's like, is that truly engagement? Am I connecting with someone just through exposure? Probably not. But if I actually interact with individuals and we share ideas and engage with one another directly, you can still do that through the internet, but I don't think that our traditional model of social media is getting us anywhere. in terms of that. I think
right, and it requires you to be on the initiative side of things. One thing I like, a little adage of mine whenever I'm thinking about reaching out to someone for the first time, is this idea of always have a gift in hand. And that gift can be anything. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going out and buying every single person you talk to a gift, but the gift can be even just really honest, kind, sincere words about someone's music or about something they posted or whatever, and connecting with that person on a deeper, more personal level that's not just, oh, cool, loved it, heart, great, heart. But
those reactions are too easy. They make it so that it's so easy to react that does it mean anything?
Right. But when you get someone that comes through and says, like there's one guy, I've been wanting to reach out to him and connect with him personally, but he, once in a while, he comes back. So I've got this video on YouTube where I did my COVID project was a reimagination of Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon.
Oh, nice.
And he likes to, like, the first time he commented was like, dude, tripped on shrooms to your video. Oh my God, it was the best experience on planet Earth. Thank you. And then he comes back several months later. Yep, still the best experience ever. Thank you.
It's like I'm loving it.
And it just led to this dialogue back and forth about, all right, just be safe, man. Just don't go God mode on us here, consuming 20 grams and expect, me to be okay with this, Yeah,
you're like, am I accountable now?
Yes, I know. And it's like, I don't know if I should encourage this, but
glad you're
don't
having
do
fun.
Drugs, kids. But
it's sometimes you make friends in the comments where you don't expect to.
Yep. Especially when you're really being your authentic self behind it, and you're not just the flippant quick comment.
Yeah, not trying to show a side that doesn't necessarily reflect who you are.
Right. So, to round up the interview, I once in a while, I typically in the past have been asking artists to give a sage piece of wisdom or advice, but I'm slowly starting to evolve that question into something else instead of offering advice, because we're all giving and receiving countless bits of advice everywhere we turn. Tell me about a time in your life. It doesn't have to be musically related. It could be. It certainly can be. That was really transformative for you in terms of your understanding and changed the way you do things, or the way you present yourself, or the way you carry yourself, or the way you make music.
It's a big question.
Bringing out the big guns.
Yeah, I know. Why don't we start with this? I think for me, one of the big driving factors for me in general is positivity. I feel like it's really easy to get yourself down in the dumps. Looking at the world, looking at social media, there's a lot of things that can bring you down, and so looking at things positively is really a quality I have tried to, and I don't always succeed, obviously, but it's a quality I try to live by. And I think that really was shaped in me by my grandmother, my father's mother. She used to always tell people, I am tremendous. Like if you said, how are you? She'd say, I am tremendous, instead of like good or fine or I'm okay. You know, the responses we all tend to give. Her response was always like, I am tremendous. And it sounded like she meant it. And I think that even later in life, she had cancer. She was in the hospital. Things didn't look good. And it was like, how you feel? And she said, I'm tremendous. And like, I think that looking, like for me, I was like 13 at the time when this happened. And I think that really like set something off, in that like you can be faced with all kinds of terrible and horrible things, but there's always something to look forward to, or there's always a spin of and I don't know, maybe it sounds naive, but I feel like, you know, we should always be able to orient ourselves towards the positive instead of focusing on the things that are bad around us. It's really, really easy to let those things overtake us. So I try to live that way in terms of keeping my focus on what's good in the situation I'm in, even if things around me aren't so good. Because I think that that's a way to keep ourselves motivated and keep ourselves moving when it's easy to just say, I'm going to give up.
That's really, really good. That's good stuff right there.
You put me on the spot, but I pulled through.
You performed admirably.
Thank you.
There's real honest to goodness like wisdom in that. It's not an easy thing by any means to, you know, in the throes of cancer to have that kind of positive outlook, but you know, to your grandmother's wisdom and her understanding, there's always something to learn. There's always something to grow. There's always something to be thankful about and to be joyful about. The difficult things in life can feel like monsters hiding under the bed, or just like this intimidating shadow in the corner of our thoughts. But in the end, there really is stuff to be grateful for. Even the most difficult things. I've heard other stories like that where people have been, you know, they're stage 4 cancer and they're in the last weeks of their life and they're still happy, joyful, and brimming with life, even though that very life is being sapped out of them. And there's a wisdom there that I think is valuable for us to tap into and to try and understand and make it a part of who we are. So yeah, good on you, Ed.
Well, like I said, it's not always easy, and I may not always follow through with that ideal. But I think that it is definitely something that has shaped my approach to problem solving, I guess, in a way of when faced with adversity, what can I do to find the light?
That's really good. Ed, I've really loved and enjoyed every minute of this conversation. We
can do it again.
Yes, let's do it again. And it doesn't even have to be recorded for the posterity of a podcast.
Yeah.
Honestly, this is what's been happening with some of these other artists I talk to. We end up continuing the conversation even long after the interview is over, and whether it's an email or, in fact, one of my friends, Stefano, he's from Entheogenic Sound Explorers. He's from Italy, and we send each other really lengthy emails, and it got to the point where it's like, you know what? I'm going to start just get my camera, and I'm just going to press start on the video, and I'm just going to talk at him for a half an hour. Like, it makes it so much easier. Yeah. But, I mean, this is what happens. You know, you have these, you make connections with people, and you continue to build on them. So, but Ed, thank you, my friend, so much for your time. I'm really excited about your new album. I've listened to it a few times now, Upper Atmosphere. It comes out May 31st. It's available on Bandcamp, and I'm assuming, too, on the streaming platforms worldwide. And it's just...
I will add as well, I am part of the early tester group for Ampwall, which is another kind of Bandcamp alternative platform that's being developed by a dedicated group of musicians. I got invited to their closed testing group, and I am also going to be putting Upper Atmosphere out on Ampwall, and I am debating, so maybe this is an announcement, or maybe it's not. I'm debating putting it out there early as part of, like, maybe next week as part of that early test, because they were like, hey, we want to drive some traffic through here and see how it works. And I was like, well, I have something coming out, so maybe we can help. So I will throw that into the mix, that Bandcamp and streaming services and Ampwall, and it's the same kind of URL configuration as Bandcamp is. It's herbers.ampwall.com. So throwing an unexpected plug out there.
Yeah, that's great. And that Ampwall is spelled AMPWALL.com.
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
I'm going to check that out as well. That sounds fantastic. Well, my friend, thousands of blessings to you that on your music and everything that you do, especially the high priority of being a father and having a new son in the mix. And I'm excited for you. It's a terrifying and exciting and thrilling ride. And, you know, it's good luck on that. And just the one bit of piece of, and I hate to do this. I hate doing this.
It's your turn to give advice.
I'm going to give just this one little piece of advice from one parent to another. Hold on with a loose grip to all of the things. So the way that they are as a child right now, hold on, but with a very loose grip, because it's all a vapor, and it quickly is becoming something else. And, you know, your kids quickly become not the person you expected them to be, and you're like, where did this human being come from? I don't remember this angsty teen coming from my wife's womb. I mean, who the heck is that? You know, the loose grip thing has been a paradigm shift for me. The idea of just letting things be what they're going to be. Yes, you can influence, you can do all the things to nurture, but eventually, gotta let it go.
Yeah, no,
like
that's good. It's good advice. My big hope is that he likes music. I feel like we've been playing stuff for him since he was born, so I hope it's all getting, configured up there, and he'll come out saying someday like, "Oh, I want to make music too." You know, that's my dream for him. But again, I don't know. I got to hold on to that dream with a loose grip.
Yes,
might not happen.
100%. Yeah, right. I know. I gave my daughter one of my guitars, and I'm just kind of like, please, 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 please. But you know,
yeah,
got to let it go. Well, my friend, thank you so much for this conversation. I appreciate it very much. You can find more music from Ed Herbers at herbers.bandcamp.com. And I'm just elated. The new album, Upper Atmosphere, it'll be out May 31st out on Bandcamp and, of course, on Ampwall as well. So, fantastic.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it. And I'm glad to have had the opportunity. It's a pleasure getting to speak with you.
Yeah.
We'll talk soon.
My pleasure. Yes.